Alright guys, welcome back to Adventures with Rosie. We did not get away this weekend, unfortunately. So what I thought I'd do instead was share some of the gear that I use to create videos out on the road, some of the gear I use to vlog with. So first things first, I use the Sony a6500 mirrorless camera. It's nice and small and compact. Screen pops out a little bit like that. It's been a really good camera for me, great for still images, does 4K. Couple of downsides to the a6500 is the battery life is terrible. You end up needing to pick up a few spare batteries for them, but typically they're quite cheap, so that's alright. The other thing is the screen doesn't fold out, so when you're vlogging you can't see what you're doing, so that can be quite frustrating. I know some of the Canon screens, the screen flips out on the side and you can actually see what you're doing. Same with the Panasonic GH5 as well, so that is the one downside I find with this camera. Lens wise, we're using the 18-105 Sony. This is a f4 lens. I'm also using the 12mm Rokinon lens, which I'm filming on right now. That's the lens I use most of the time. 12mm is nice and wide enough for those, you know, jobby shots, holding it out on your arm there, talking to camera. So that's the main lens that stays on the camera. Unfortunately, that lens doesn't have any zoom, so you've got to swap between the two to get zoom. Audio. So right now I'm using a lav mic, but typically I use this Rode Video Micro with the Wind dead cat on the top there. Great little microphone, cheap as chips. There is a pro version of it that I might look at getting in the future, because as you've probably heard in a few videos, the audio hasn't been too flash on this. Sometimes I hear it rattling around, so I might look at getting the pro version in the future. So tripods, we got the Jobby. This is the main workhorse, sort of Casey Neistat styles, holding the Jobby out like that, talking into the Jobby. This is the pro level of the Jobby you can get. I do have a cheaper one that actually have a lot of issues with the legs popping off. It doesn't feel as sturdy. The downside to this bigger one is it's that little bit heavier, but well worthwhile having a good Jobby to, you know, you want a good tripod to put your camera on. I also have a couple of smaller tripods, like this little Manfrotto one. I typically put my GoPros on these for time lapses and that sort of thing. So yeah, handy little tripod there. So speaking of GoPros, I have two of the Hero 4, one black, one silver. One has a screen on the back, one doesn't. The reason I have two is that I used to have one on a drone and I burnt our old garage down in our old house. So I was charging some drone batteries that actually exploded and I lost all my drones, some model aircraft. I also lost a couple of old Heroes, like Hero 3s I think. So I was given 4s when the insurance replaced them, so that's quite good. GoPro accessories, my favorite accessory is the suction cup. This suction cup has had a hard life. It's all rusted, seized up from salt water and that sort of thing. But you can't go wrong with a suction cup for getting shots of you traveling. As you'll see here, a lot of these shots I'm getting of us traveling on the road, the sped up sort of driving shots are all done with the suction cup. One thing I would recommend is that you buy the genuine GoPro suction cup. I've owned a few cheap ones and they're just not as good and not as sturdy, but the genuine GoPro one, although it is more expensive obviously than the knockoff ones you can get, I think it's well worth it. The other thing I would definitely recommend is picking up a bunch of these GoPro tethers. So these are just basically a little string tether with a 3M sticky, double-sided sticky thing. So you can use that as an extra tether to tether your tripod on. Now I've never had a tripod fall off, but I usually tether it with something, either with a piece of string, a small carabiner, something like that. I mean, last thing you want to do is drop a GoPro on the road and have someone run over it. The GoPros I use, probably for 99% of the time, I leave them in their waterproof cases. I don't want to get the lenses scratched up or scratch the back screens or anything, so whenever there's an outdoor shot with a GoPro, time-lapse, driving shots, anything like that, I'm using this case. The GoPros don't produce the greatest image, I find. I have to change it a lot. It's quite a sort of dull image. I normally have to bump saturation and that sort of thing up on them. But I mean, there's no way I can just have a big camera like this sitting out on the windscreen filming a driving shot. So that's where the GoPros come in handy. The versatile, heaps of uses for them. Another thing I quite like is the GoPro selfie stick. This is a SP Gadgets one. and it's extendable. I use this for underwater shots. You might have seen recently when we were in Tatapuri Bay, I used this stick. I held it upside down like this, and I held it in the water when we were looking at stingrays, and just got some up close and personal shots of the stingrays. So that was quite good. Highly recommend these. One thing I also love that I take out on the road with me is the Syrup Gypsy Mini. Now this is a time-lapse device that rotates. So there's an app on your phone that basically you can say, I want you to start here and end here, and I want you to take 20 minutes to do it. And what you end up with, if you pop the GoPro on here or the other camera, is you end up with sort of adding another element to your time-lapse shots. So, you know, it's all well and good to have a still time-lapse shot like that, things are moving, whatever, but adding that panning into a time-lapse shot can just make it. It's a fun little piece of kit. It's got an inbuilt battery that lasts for quite a while. I picked this up secondhand. If you can get one secondhand that's been well looked after, I highly recommend getting one of those. You can also use it to just do video panning. So you can put the Syrup on top of your tripod and just make it pan left and right like that, instead of trying to hold your hand steady and get a nice pan. You can put it on the jobby and go, there you go, do a 360 or a 180. So the next thing I want to touch base on is batteries. I have a ton of batteries, and the reason for this is that the A6500 isn't too flash on batteries. It chews through them. I think I've got 4 or 5 batteries. Same for the GoPros. So the GoPros, I've got a bunch of batteries for them, some genuine GoPro ones, some knockoff ones, which aren't that great. I wouldn't recommend buying the cheapest batteries you can for the GoPro. One trick that I do with the batteries, which I saw on another YouTube channel, is to put rubber bands around the battery. So when I've charged a battery, it's come off the charger, it's 100% full, I put a rubber band around it and I chuck it in my camera bag. And I know no matter where that ends up, if it's in Rosy, it's in a cupboard, it's in a camera bag, I know that's fully charged. So you can quite quickly tell, okay, I've got a handful of batteries here, 4 of them are charged, that one's not on charge. It's been such a helpful little trick for me when I've been out and about. If you're worried about missing a shot and you're fumbling around trying to find a full battery, that's definitely rubber band. Saved my bacon a few times. One thing I would recommend if you're out and about and you're travel vlogging is keep all your stuff charged up. Charge it each night, ready to go the next day. Check your cards aren't getting full in your camera. Sometimes I've jumped, and in the early days I'd jump out, okay, I want to get a cool time lapse. Turn the camera on, 10% battery. Oh, great. Finding a battery, so I tend to put a fresh battery in every night. Camera's off, make sure all my other batteries are on charge, and also check your SD cards because they fill up from time to time. And there's been a few shots I've lost time lapses because my SD card's filled up and it's turned off 5 minutes into the time lapse. I carry around a little waterproof Pelican case with my SD cards in them. I don't have heaps of SD cards, I've got some older ones. I always have a 64 gig backup that's empty, a few smaller ones for the GoPros. Another trick that I learnt, which I quite like, is that when you have filled up an SD card, put it in your case face down. So when you go to grab the next one, you know that face down one is full and that one's empty, and away you go. Once you've filled up that one, it goes into the case face down. Just another helpful little trick when you're out and about, save you fumbling, mucking around. I definitely would recommend that you get a bunch of smaller SD cards rather than one big one. I know they're roughly the same price to get 128 gig or a few 32s, but if something goes wrong on your big SD card and you lose a week's worth of travel vlogging, that's rather annoying. I'd rather take the time, swap a few out each day, and away you go. A couple of other cool things that I use. One is the roll cage mount or bar mount for the GoPro. So you basically just unscrew these, mount it onto a bar. You can put that on bicycles. I think it's made for roll cages of cars. We don't have a roll cage in Rosy, but I've managed to put that around a few things sometimes, so that's quite helpful. Another one is the old, what do you call that? A mouth guard mount. So GoPro mounted on the front there, in your mouth, and you get a really cool sort of first person view if you're swimming or something like that, having the GoPro right there. Sometimes I'll also use a head strap and get a few driving shots like that while I'm driving, mainly just to sort of keep my hands free. But yeah, another cool little cool little thing for underwater. The final thing that I use, which I didn't have on the table at the start, is the drone. Now this is the worst drone you can buy for travel vlogging. It's big. I have a full Pelican case, big Pelican case, that the drone sits in, spare batteries, controller, iPad for the drone. Now I bought this is the Phantom 3 Pro, and I bought this when it first came out, before we even had Rosy, and it's been an awesome drone. So this, obviously the Phantom 3 Pro was pre-Mavic, pre-Spark, pre-Mavic Air, so it was kind of this size drone you bought at the time. It takes up a lot of space in Rosy. It's obviously a bit slower to power up and you know, configure than the newer drones. So at some stage I'll look at getting the Mavic, I think, the Mavic Pro. At this stage, hard to justify when this thing's still going strong. I've crashed it a few times. It's got a few cracks and grass stains on it. Flew into a bunch of pine trees backwards one day, and it sort of just popped apart, and I managed to clip it all back together. So it's been a really good tool. It's an awesome way of getting another perspective of shots. I love putting the drone up. It's getting a little bit harder to fly them in New Zealand with the laws and stuff, so that's one thing to be mindful of. A lot of places you can't fly them, a lot of permissions you need to fly them, but it's an awesome tool. It's a cool way to sort of, for me, to help show you guys New Zealand. So that basically concludes all my gear. I have a backpack I keep it all in, a Low Pro. I'm not sure of the model of backpack. It's got a waterproof cover. It's quite nice. It's exactly carry-on size for a plane, which is good. So that's where I keep the bulk of my gear. And yeah, like I said, the hard case for the drone. It actually takes up the whole of one of these seats under the bus just for the drone. I don't tell Chelsea, I just sort of tuck it in there. So you know, when we look to go on the road full time in the future, I think I'm going to have to downsize, get something smaller, something that I can put in the cupboard rather than take up a whole seat. Might have to tow a trailer or something maybe for the drone. Anyway, thank you for watching. If you have any questions at all about gear, about what I like, what I don't like for gear, what I find easy to use, where I get gear from, ask away in the questions below, and we'll see you in the next adventure.